They thought my silence meant weakness. They thought I would never act. They were dead wrong. My name is Lila, and for years I had perfected the art of being invisible. Not because I lacked confidence, but because I understood something most people never do. Silence is far more powerful than anger. People underestimate those who observe, and that underestimation can be deadly. I worked at a mid-sized company where office politics was a second language. Everyone had an ego, everyone wanted credit, and everyone tried to push the quiet ones aside. I was known as the girl who never argued, the girl who always said yes, the girl who didn't make waves. And that made me invisible. At first, that invisibility felt safe. I smiled, I nodded, I stayed quiet. But slowly, I began to notice patterns. Colleagues who should have supported me took credit for my ideas. My boss praised work that I had done alone, often adding, "Great teamwork with Samantha," when Samantha had done nothing but sit there and smile. Sometimes I caught Samantha laughing with others about my quiet nature, making subtle jokes as if I couldn't hear. I didn't react. Not yet. I began observing, noting every little thing. The way Samantha bragged too freely about tasks she hadn't completed. The way my boss nodded without verifying facts. The casual overconfidence of my colleagues. The way they assumed I would never notice. Each action, each word, each careless gesture became part of a puzzle I was silently solving. Weeks passed. I perfected patience. I smiled when Samantha took credit. I laughed politely when my boss complimented her on work that was mine. And as they exposed themselves with overconfidence and arrogance, I silently documented every slip-up. Every small detail mattered: tone, timing, facial expressions, casual remarks. I also started subtle testing. A casual question here, a hint of doubt there, nothing obvious, just enough to watch them reveal their true colors. And they did, every single time. They never suspected that the quiet one was taking mental notes, that every lie and every manipulation was being stored in my mind. Outside the office, I reflected on the situation. I realized that confrontation too early would ruin everything. Patience was my weapon. Silence was my shield. And soon both would become my sword. One evening, while looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The girl who stayed quiet to avoid conflict was gone. In her place stood someone alert, calculating, patient, and ready. She had learned how to wait, how to observe, how to turn invisibility into power. I knew it wouldn't be long before the people who underestimated me would regret it. The smug smiles, the overconfidence, the laughter behind my back. They were all seeds of their own downfall. I smiled quietly, letting the plan simmer in my mind. For now, I waited, watching, learning, recording. Every small mistake they made would add up. Every careless action would become evidence. Every underestimated moment would become part of the story that would eventually unravel. Because the best revenge is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It creeps in silently, patiently, until the person who wronged you realizes too late that they never saw it coming. And I was already in position. They thought my silence made me weak. They had no idea it was their biggest mistake. Weeks had passed since I began observing my colleagues. Samantha continued taking credit for my work, smiling as if she owned every idea. My boss continued praising her while ignoring my contributions. But I didn't react. I stayed quiet, patient, and most importantly, I planned. I realized early on that direct confrontation would only make them defensive. The best way to make them regret underestimating me was to use their arrogance against them. And that required precision, patience, silence. I started small. A casual suggestion here, a hint of doubt there. During team meetings, I asked subtle questions about project timelines, deadlines, and responsibilities. Questions designed to make them reveal their lack of understanding. Samantha, thinking I was still naive and quiet, answered carelessly, often contradicting herself. My boss, relying too much on Samantha's confidence, didn't notice. Every slip, every exaggeration, every careless statement, they were all evidence. And I remembered them all. Outside the office, I started documenting in my notebook. Not just actions, but habits, patterns, phrases they used when they thought no one was listening. Samantha laughed about my quietness, my supposed inability to speak up. But I remembered every laugh, every smirk, every subtle mockery. One evening, Samantha came to me, smiling sweetly. "You're so calm, Lila," she said. "It's funny how quiet you are, but somehow everyone thinks you're harmless." I smiled back. "I guess people misjudge calmness sometimes." Her eyes flickered briefly, almost imperceptibly. She didn't realize that I had already begun turning their confidence into their weakness. The following week, I executed my first subtle move. I prepared an alternative version of the team report, highlighting small errors Samantha had made and subtly suggesting improvements without pointing fingers. I sent it to my boss as a thoughtful revision, masking the fact that it was designed to catch Samantha's mistakes. When the next meeting happened, Samantha confidently presented her work, assuming I wouldn't notice. But as soon as she finished, I casually referred to the revised report. My boss raised an eyebrow, noticing inconsistencies in her presentation. Samantha hesitated, stammered, and for the first time, I saw her composure crack. It was subtle, but it worked. The first tiny crack had appeared in her confidence, and I smiled quietly to myself. I wasn't done. Far from it. This was just the beginning. Over the next few days, I continued observing, waiting for more mistakes and planning small opportunities for them to expose themselves. I never intervened aggressively. I let them make their own missteps. Every time they overreached, every time they lied, every time they tried to manipulate the situation, I recorded it mentally. The beauty of patience is that it forces arrogance to reveal itself. And both Samantha and my boss were arrogant. They assumed my silence was weakness. They didn't realize it was the calm before the storm. At home, I reflected on my strategy. I had learned that revenge didn't require yelling, confrontation, or dramatic gestures. It only required awareness, patience, and precision. I was invisible, yes, but invisibility can be more powerful than confrontation when used correctly. By the end of the week, the first subtle victories had accumulated. Samantha had slipped twice in front of the team, exposing her overconfidence. My boss had started questioning details he usually ignored, noticing for the first time that something was off. And all of it had been orchestrated silently, without anyone suspecting that I was behind the careful unraveling. I smiled in the quiet of my room that night. The plan was working. The people who thought they were untouchable were starting to show cracks. And I had all the time in the world, because silence, patience, and observation are more powerful than the loudest scream. And soon, the full reckoning would come. They thought they had control. But the moment they slipped, I was ready. By now, Samantha had begun to notice subtle changes in the office dynamics, but she didn't know who was behind them. My calm observation had started working like clockwork. Every careless word, every boast, every manipulation she attempted became part of my silent record. It was during a client meeting that the first major opportunity arrived. Samantha, confident as ever, presented a project plan to our clients without cross-checking crucial details. She assumed I would stay quiet, as usual. She assumed I would let her shine. I didn't interrupt. I smiled politely and listened. After the meeting, I casually mentioned a minor inconsistency in the plan. "Oh, I must have misread that," Samantha said, brushing it off. Her tone was defensive, but her slip had been recorded. Later, I followed up with an email to the clients, subtly correcting the error but framing it as a clarification rather than criticism. The clients responded positively, thanking me for the insightful adjustment. Samantha saw this and her confidence wavered slightly, but she still didn't suspect me. I let her think she had survived the first trap. Meanwhile, my boss began to notice something unusual. Samantha, who was usually composed and charming, seemed a little off during interactions. He questioned her performance in small, casual ways, unknowingly amplifying her stress. Every question she stumbled over, every forced smile, every hint of frustration was another piece of evidence I stored mentally. At my desk, I planned the next step. Each move had to be subtle, almost invisible. Direct confrontation would ruin everything. The power of my revenge lay in invisibility, in letting arrogance reveal itself naturally. And Samantha's arrogance was deliciously predictable. The next week, I orchestrated a small team exercise. Everyone was assigned roles, and I made sure Samantha's responsibilities were slightly more challenging than usual without drawing attention. As predicted, she mishandled a minor task, made a small error in communication, and tried to cover it up with excuses. I didn't expose her immediately. I smiled, acknowledged her explanation, and let it slide. Patience was key. Every observer noticed the cracks forming in Samantha's composure, and my boss began to question the reliability of the reports she had previously submitted. Even during casual conversations, I planted subtle hints. I noticed a few inconsistencies in last week's submission, I said lightly, directing the attention away from myself. Samantha fidgeted, glanced at the floor, and muttered something under her breath. My heart raced with satisfaction, but I remained outwardly calm. By the end of the week, the first real cracks in Samantha's confidence were evident. Colleagues started noticing minor discrepancies, clients questioned minor details, and my boss quietly double-checked information he had previously trusted blindly. The beauty of patience is that it forces arrogance to betray itself. Samantha had never imagined that the quiet one was not just aware, but strategizing. Every boast, every manipulation, every moment of overconfidence had been building her downfall. That night, I reflected on my progress. I had achieved the first visible results without raising my voice, without confrontation, without revealing my hand. My patience and careful observation had turned invisibility into power. I smiled. The people who had thought themselves untouchable were starting to unravel, and I had not even shown my full strength. The trap was only beginning. And soon, every lie they had told, every credit they had stolen would be exposed in ways they could never imagine. They thought they were untouchable, but arrogance always leaves a trace. By now, Samantha's confidence had begun to wobble. She still tried to act composed in front of everyone, but her mistakes were becoming harder to hide. Every small slip, every tiny contradiction was a thread I could pull, and I planned to pull it slowly, deliberately. The next big opportunity came during a major client presentation. Samantha had prepared extensively, convinced that I wouldn't notice a single flaw. I observed silently from the back, notebook ready, recording every detail in my mind. The room was full of clients, my boss, and the entire team. Samantha began her presentation confidently, using charts, graphs, and carefully rehearsed lines. But as she spoke, small errors began to surface. Dates mismatched, figures inconsistent, conclusions unsupported. She didn't realize that I had prepared the exact corrections beforehand. At the right moment, I spoke up casually. I noticed a few minor discrepancies in the charts. Perhaps these adjustments would make the projections clearer. Samantha froze. Her confident smile faltered. My boss glanced at her, curiosity and doubt creeping into his expression. The room fell silent, clients nodding at my clarification. Samantha tried to recover, but every attempt to explain only made the errors more obvious. My smile remained calm, almost polite. I didn't need to say more. The evidence spoke for itself. After the meeting, whispers spread through the office. Samantha's credibility had taken a small but undeniable hit. My boss, for the first time, questioned her reliability, reviewing her past reports with scrutiny. Each overlooked detail, each manipulation was now under observation. But I didn't stop there. Over the next few days, I planted small traps designed to provoke more mistakes. Emails were subtly worded to highlight inconsistencies. Tasks were assigned in ways that tested her attention to detail. And every time Samantha or my boss made a misstep, I noted it silently, storing mental evidence that would build into an undeniable pattern. The beauty of a well-executed plan is that it appears natural. Samantha didn't realize her errors were being highlighted strategically, and my boss didn't see that I was orchestrating their exposure without confrontation. Their arrogance blinded them to the invisible threads I was pulling. Even in casual conversations, I dropped hints. I think this could be improved, I said lightly, watching Samantha fidget. I wonder if there's another way to handle it. Her reactions were priceless. Hesitation, defensiveness, subtle panic. And each reaction was evidence, another piece of the puzzle. By the end of the week, the trap was fully visible, but still undetected by them. Samantha and my boss believed they were still in control, unaware that I had already set the pieces for their downfall. They were walking on a stage where every misstep was being noted, every error amplified. At home, I reflected on the progress. My plan was working exactly as intended. Patience and observation had revealed the cracks in arrogance. Every boast, every manipulation, every stolen credit, everything would soon be exposed. And I waited, calmly, silently, because when the time came, the fall wouldn't be loud. It would be precise, undeniable, and devastating. They thought they were untouchable, but every lie has a price. The day of reckoning had arrived. Samantha walked into the office, confident as ever, unaware that the web she had spun around herself was about to unravel. My boss, too, believed that I was still the quiet, harmless girl in the corner. Neither had a clue that their arrogance had already set the stage for their downfall. I requested a team meeting under the guise of a routine review. Everyone gathered, chatting casually, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. Samantha stood at the front, smiling smugly, assuming the spotlight was hers. I started calmly. "I've noticed a few discrepancies in some of the recent reports," I said. Immediately, Samantha jumped in. "Those reports were fine. I double-checked everything, Lila." I nodded politely. "I'm sure you did. But when cross-referencing the data, there are some inconsistencies that may need clarification." I presented the emails, project drafts, and documented mistakes, subtly but clearly highlighting the gaps that Samantha had ignored or manipulated. I spoke softly, without anger, letting the evidence speak for itself. Samantha's confident smile faltered. She tried to explain herself, to twist the facts, but every word she uttered only revealed more mistakes. Her missteps, once minor, now became glaring under the scrutiny I had orchestrated. My boss leaned forward, eyebrows furrowed, reading through the emails and reports. Doubt and confusion spread across his face. These discrepancies are real?" he asked, glancing at Samantha. "Yes," I said calmly. "I documented them as they occurred." The room fell silent. Colleagues exchanged whispers, realization dawning on their faces. Samantha's arrogance had finally been exposed, and my boss could no longer deny the evidence in front of him. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need drama. Every error, every manipulation, every stolen credit had already built the story. And now, the truth had revealed itself without me raising my voice. Samantha's face went pale. She stammered, searching for words that wouldn't come. My boss, for the first time, questioned not just her work, but the decisions he had made based on her manipulation. After the meeting, whispers continued in the office. Colleagues approached me, some offering quiet congratulations, others still processing what had happened. Samantha avoided my gaze entirely, realizing that her carefully built facade had crumbled. I walked back to my desk, calm and collected. I had planned this meticulously, quietly, without drawing attention to myself. My patience, observation, and subtle manipulation had brought about justice without confrontation. At home that evening, I reflected on the outcome. The people who had underestimated me, who had stolen credit and mocked my silence, had been exposed in the most effective way possible. I hadn't shouted, I hadn't threatened, yet the lesson had been delivered loud and clear. For the first time, I felt free. Free from their manipulation, free from the weight of being underestimated, free to be myself, strong, aware, and no longer invisible. And as I looked in the mirror, I whispered softly to myself, "They thought my silence meant weakness. But silence, patience, and observation are more powerful than arrogance ever imagined." They thought it was over. But the real lesson was only beginning. The office had returned to its normal rhythm, but nothing felt the same. Samantha, once confident and untouchable, now moved cautiously. My boss, too, seemed more attentive, more measured, and less blind to details. Their arrogance had been stripped away quietly, effectively, and with precision. I, on the other hand, returned to my desk as if nothing had happened. Calm, composed, and entirely in control. I didn't need recognition or applause. The truth, once revealed, carried its own weight. Colleagues whispered, some with admiration, some with surprise. But no one questioned the shift. The silent observer had claimed her victory. That night, I reflected on the journey. For months, I had stayed quiet, patient, and observant. I had absorbed every insult, every stolen credit, every condescending remark, and turned it into a plan that would expose arrogance in its purest form. And it worked, flawlessly. Yet, the most important lesson was not about revenge. It was about self-respect. I had learned that staying true to myself, even in silence, could be more powerful than shouting, threatening, or reacting impulsively. My patience had become my weapon, my observation my shield. A few days later, I received subtle nods from colleagues I hadn't interacted with much, a quiet acknowledgement of my competence, my intelligence, and my restraint. No one needed to announce it. I didn't need to broadcast my success. Silence had done that for me. Even Samantha began avoiding unnecessary interactions, realizing that every boastful word she had said, every manipulation, had been meticulously recorded. My boss, now careful with praise and delegation, had learned the hard way that arrogance blinds even those in authority. At home, I looked into the mirror and smiled. Not with vengeance, not with malice, but with understanding. The girl who had been quiet, underestimated, and overlooked was gone. In her place stood someone aware, strong, and empowered. Someone who had learned to navigate the subtle currents of human behavior and turn them into a force for justice. And yet, I understood something more profound. Revenge doesn't need drama. It doesn't need to be loud. The quiet, patient approach leaves a mark far deeper than confrontation ever could. People remember the subtle shifts, the understated power, the invisible hand that guides outcomes without drawing attention. As I sat back, a sense of peace settled over me. I had reclaimed myself. I had demonstrated, without cruelty, that underestimating someone who observes quietly is a grave mistake. The lesson was clear. Arrogance and deceit will always be exposed, but patience, intelligence, and quiet strength create lasting impact. The world will continue to test, challenge, and underestimate. But I had learned my power, and now no one could ever take that from me. I whispered softly, almost to myself. They laughed at me, ignored me, and stole from me. But I stayed silent, patient, and aware. And in the end, I won without lifting a finger loudly. This is the power of observation, patience, and self-respect.